the stock market is opening any second now, maybe right now. See all those Uber people. Uber's IPO is finally here. The day is finally here, and people are going to be able to invest in Uber. It's going public. So we're looking at the stock market numbers now. So right now, just down a little bit. This follows an increase in China's tariffs. The Trump administration hiked tariffs on $20 billion worth of goods, or rather $200 billion worth of goods. And it's expected that American businesses and consumers are going to pay much more because of it. So there we have it right now, but we're going to dig in a little bit deeper about what sort of impact this is going to have on us, regular people who maybe are not investing in the stock market, but just maybe want to go buy a car or something. So for more on this, we're joined by senior columnist at Yahoo Finance, Rick Newman. Hey, Rick, it's really nice to see you again. We haven't talked in a while.
Great to be with you.
So listen, just taking a look at the board. See, I really don't know much about what the numbers really mean. It looked like the stock market opened relatively flat, a tiny bit down. But when you look at the numbers, what do you think?
We've seen a sell-off this week that seems to be directly in response to Trump's statement on Sunday when he said he was going to raise these tariffs. So he's now done what he said he was going to do, and markets have kind of digested this move at this point. The one thing to keep in mind is these tariffs don't apply to imports that are on their way to the United States. So if they're on a ship, they're not going to get hit with these tariffs. But after that, they will kick in these tariffs. So that's about a 2 or 3 week window. And I think investors are kind of thinking that's a little window where we might get some kind of relief here and maybe a deal.
Well, that's the thing about it. We know that Chinese negotiators are here, and the hope is that they'll be working around the clock to hammer out something that makes both sides happy. But what will this mean for American consumers? What sort of goods are we talking about that we're going to start to see the impact if this drags on any longer?
Yeah, you have to break this down into parts. So last year, President Trump imposed tariffs on these $200 billion worth of imports of 10%. So 10% on $200 billion, that's a $20 billion tax hike. And you got it right when you began the segment. That is paid by Americans, companies, and consumers, not by the Chinese, as President Trump keeps saying. So now that has gone from 10% to 25%. So a $20 billion tax hike becomes a $50 billion tax hike. Now, that's not a lot of money when you look at how large the U.S. economy is, but that hurts. That is going to hurt some people paying these. The next thing to watch is whether President Trump imposes tariffs, as he has threatened to do, on another $300 billion or so of Chinese imports. That would hurt a lot more because that would include finished products, think toys, clothing, furniture, electronics, and those would be price hikes people would see at stores. So for that reason, I think Trump is going to be very reluctant to do that, but he has threatened to do it, and we should keep in mind he has done what he has said he is going to do with regard to these tariffs.
Yeah, he's threatened, and he's also sort of arguing that it's actually a good thing for our economy. Earlier this morning, the president tweeted that tariffs will bring far more wealth to our country, arguing that, this will allow Americans to actually sort of buy American and maybe, buy from our farmers. I want to know if this is logical because, we've done stories on the way the tariffs are impacting many farmers. Certainly soybeans are at the top of the list, and most of those farmers are growing soybeans not for the American market, but for the Chinese market.
Right, and the reason for that is that a lot of these other countries, most notably China, but others as well, have imposed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. exports to those countries. So that means it's much harder for farmers to sell those products to other countries. Economists' heads explode when Trump makes this argument because no economists believe this. Tariffs basically raise prices on everybody, and everybody loses. So everybody pays more. And I think Americans should be asking, OK, we know Trump is trying to get tough on China, but what is the point of all this? What is he really trying to accomplish? And he's basically trying to get a better deal so that we can sell more stuff to China, not less stuff to China. But that's not where this is headed for the time being.
Yeah. So I just want to sort of dip back into the stock market. You talked about how there's definitely seeing some sort of impact, but it's not like a major free fall. We did kind of see a major slump a few days ago, but it seems like things leveled off. I don't know if it was because there was news that negotiations were still ongoing, and maybe that makes investors less nervous. They have hope that some sort of deal will be hammered out. But, what are we to make of what we're seeing? And also, we started this whole thing off by showing, the Uber employees. So I don't know if maybe Uber is having an impact on the stock market as well.
Probably not at this point. I think something as big as a potential trade war would sort of swamp anything like an IPO at this point. But I think that markets are still betting that there is going to be some kind of deal between the United States and China, and we're not going to get into a full-blown trade war with much higher tariffs on everything China imports to the United States and then retaliatory tariffs the other way. Markets still do not think that's going to happen, but they do think that the risk is higher than it used to be. So that's why we've seen the sell-off this week. And now we seem to have a little bit of a grace period, a couple of weeks before these tariffs really go into effect on the ground and prices actually start to go up. So maybe something will happen in that interim 2 to 3 week period. But if it doesn't, we could see another adverse reaction in the markets.
Rick, are trade wars easy, like the president says?
Does this seem easy to anybody?
No.
This trade war began a year ago. We don't seem to have made progress. We seem to have gone backwards. We're now threatening each other. Farmers are hurting. Farm incomes are down. And I think President Trump is kind of losing the messaging battle here. I mean, he's saying that he's kind of coming up with crazy arguments for why this is good for us, when on the ground it is not good for us.
All right, Rick, thank you so much for sort of clarifying things, bringing us up to speed. Appreciate it. Have a good Friday.
Thanks for having me.